yeah. So we had the flippy things, like where you drop the heavy ball, and that was like a deconstruction of the Cascade. There had been a graduating class from, I think it was the Lido Circus School in Toulouse, and this would have been like, I don't know, in the 90s or something. But I saw some video one time, and I can't find it since then. I mean, it was a VHS tape in France I saw or something. But some guy had like a, you know, if like you're in the marching band, you have your harness for your snare drum or something. So he had a harness, and he had just a tray. And on the tray, he had little teeter boards, and then he had 3 balls, and he did like some sort of 3-ball cascade on teeter boards, and he walked around the circus ring. Right. And I really remembered that. I was like, that was so cool. Because it was just such a deconstruction. Again, he could have just had 3 balls and like he didn't need this whole like contraption. Yeah. So that's kind of been the image I've been chasing my whole life with like a lot of this stuff. And it was so cool that it was like mobile, like you could walk around and do this cute little trick. Yeah. But so yeah, so that kind of those flippy things that we just saw, that was part of that. And this is another version of it, which is totally not as exciting, but basically, it was just deconstructing a cascade. I mean, this is just making the throw horizontal instead of vertical. So, you know, you can just, if they're calibrated, you can just roll, and then here. And it's kind of nice with 5 balls, because then you get more balls rolling at the same time. Yeah. Here's the non-crossed arm version. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of like this idea. Like, I still think there's something missing. Like with 5 balls, you kind of get a relationship of the balls to each other in a different way than if you did 5 balls in the air. Like the relationship of how the balls follow each other. It's just a different dynamic because it's slower and it's horizontal and it's moving, whatever. There's still something missing about this for me. It's not like my favorite thing, but it's also not like, I feel there's more potential here, but I don't know what it is. And they're also, again, they're homemade, like everything's homemade, and which many times if the technique is robust enough, I think the homemade quality is really nice. But like here, you know, they're not precise and they're hard to tune and they're hard to dial in, and they're kind of wobbly. Like, I mean, my dad did a great job, but it's not an industrial design. It's not precision, you know, machined. Yeah. And that's the other reason why I never toured much with these, is because every venue you get to, you have to like set them up, and like you don't have time normally. You just want to put things down and have them work. But I don't know. Yeah. What do you think when you see? Is it like, I don't know. Is it something? Is it nothing? I can't tell. It's like one of these things. I don't know. Is it like a thing or not a thing?
Well, yeah. I bet the 5 would be cool. I like the 3 even. I have a hard time imagining more that it could do. Like,
right.
There's the potential. It's not fulfilling.
Well, so that's
something.
But you bring up a good point. I mean, if you could hold those.
Can do.
So it's like a lot of these things, and again, like we've been talking. It's like this started off when I was a kid. Yeah. You know, 10 years old or 9 years old even with some of these things, and then going all the way up and through. Well, easily for the next 10 years or 15 or 20 years after that, even until today, I mean, a little bit, this type of work I've been doing. And so there's definitely a choice when you have an object like this. Again, it goes back to that idea of like, I haven't explored stage makeup or costume design enough to really like explore it on stage. So, okay, here's a new object. Well, it does this, like it does that, right? And you said, yeah, maybe it's hard to imagine it doing something else. But I mean, the other stuff it could do would be like, you know, like this, you know, like I could do this, and then I could do, you know, I could roll it, I could take it, and then I could do this, and so there was a very clear idea from the beginning of all this kind of work that I just wanted to explore the shape itself, and not go into, oh, I can throw under my legs, so now that I have this, I can, if I had a second ball, you know, I can roll this and then throw under my leg and then catch it. And like, is that something more this could do? In one way, yes, right? You could fill out the moment with other techniques, but at the same time, throwing under the leg has nothing to do with this.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying before, where some of the things are built for one thing, and then other things are like, you could write a whole act around it. And like, which one is this?
Right. Yeah, true.
You explore it really far, or is it like it's the thing that does this, and then it goes away?
And there's also the essence of like, you know, you can put the ball here. Oh, okay, so then it rolls. Well, does it do me much good if I put the ball here? Like maybe, but like, what are you trying to do with this? You know, you can just kind of make things gratuitously harder or more tricky or more convoluted or more visually, you know, I could put this here and then I could hold this ball here or something. Oh, like whatever, right? But that would be definitely a different direction than I'm taking all this work.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of, in the first place, fascinated where, what do these two ramps, like how can they deconstruct a throw that's so that it's not vertical, it's horizontal?
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I mean, for sure, if I would have spent 10 years with this shape in my life, maybe I would get to the point where, you know, doing like this would have some sort of meaning, or, you know, whatever. It's like the opposite, or I don't know, like something. Or then you start to understand like where that kind of makes some sort of sense, that I would catch it there instead of there.
Sure.
I find this so irrelevant to what we're doing here.
Sure.
But you could, of course, make things more tricky. I mean, I could, for example, I could do like here. You know, and then I could turn around and but I just don't understand enough about this yet to motivate that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's a struggle with all the shapes.
Sure.
It's like how much do you add in from the past of like what you previously carry with you? Yeah. Into what are you trying to do? Like why does this exist?
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking that the whole time, like as you build these props or have your dad build these props, like how much do you know if it's gonna be for one thing, or like I want to write a whole routine with this, or does it only become obvious after you've played with it?
I think because like it's hard to articulate all these things. Like I never tried to explain any of this to anybody before, but somehow there is some sort of like intuition inside of me, like a red thread or like a direct line between all these things. Like one kind of leads to another, different phases of the work. So I'd say pretty much, like, this was definitely built with the intent of, like, this is the one trick. Like, I knew it in my mind before it existed. Yeah. That's such a different way of working than we normally work with juggling these days. Like, since I started off juggling, it's really like, hey, order these 3 balls from whatever website, and then you know you can do this, but, like, what else can you do with that? Yeah. Like, what else can you do? Like, you're going to explore what else this can do, because you're starting with the idea of the prop and not the technique. But when you're making custom props, at least in this kind of way, like the jack shape from Jerry Martin's a little different, right? That jack shape is just an abstract shape, and then you start to try to find patterns that it can do or ways it can interact with your body. But this kind of things, I knew already in my mind exactly. I was like, it's a 5-ball Cascade. The throws just go sideways instead of up and down. How is that possible? Oh, it could be like this. Yeah. And then starting to try to, you know, how long should that be, and like what's the, whatever. Cool. So, this definitely, and I think that's definitely a way that jugglers used to work like that 100 years ago more. You would sit down and say, I'm going to balance this thing on top of this, and you have to construct those things that they fit together. Right. So you already know the trick before you make something. Right. But then, let's see. So that was definitely just one trick. But then, this one here, we'll look at it a little bit later, but I started with this one with just the 2. And so it's the same thing as those 2 ramps we just saw. You're taking that throw from one hand and you're putting it in a loop here, or like a curve, and the other throw has another curve, like when you just have 2, right? So then you have some sort of I haven't done this since 1998. I haven't done this. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So then you have some sort of deconstruction, or again, pulling apart of the pattern. So then I started to notice that when I was just working on pulling apart the Cascade and having them go in these loops instead of just on the slopes, maybe it's like some sort of upside down throw. Right. Like if you have a throw like an arc like that, now you have an arc like that or something. I don't know. Yeah. I started to notice that in some of those explorations of that scenario, if I had more iterations of the structure, that the pattern could just jump between them independently or something. I don't remember what those are now, but they are. oh, something like.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Alright.
Right?
Yeah.
Alright, and that could just continue on forever. Or if this was in a circle and then it was a turning, then you could just, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's the new slow motion dominoes.
That's right.
So now I have to build.
First circuit delay.
Oh, it comes out of the floor. It comes from the ceiling. From the ceiling.
Right.
And then the whole, I don't turn, but the audience turns around me. Around. But yeah, and then you just stay in one space, and then this whole thing is just turning around you at the right speed. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Let's make that.
Okay.
But yeah, so then this became a whole, I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
But you know, it writes itself. Oh, this is a thing. Oh, and this is like a whole bunch of stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. I don't know.
You get some of this, you get some of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a problem though with like all these things. Like there's a big problem with this. And there's kind of a big problem with everything I've showed you so far in one way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a reason why none of it really maybe stuck around in my life. I mean, sure, this is awkward to carry, but if it would have been the most genius, great thing, I could have found a way to work. I mean, come on. People do flying trapeze. Like, you can have a flying trapeze rig with a net and it's okay. But there's something about all these structures where it's like, there's no new information in the system from after the initial throw, right? So I come out on stage, this is here, you see it, you understand immediately what the shape is. It's not gonna change. It's not gonna morph. And then and you kind of anticipate what might happen, I guess, even if you're not a juggler. And then I go like this, and kind of like the next 5 minutes, it's the same thing. There's no real evolution of the basic concept. There's no new layer of new information that makes it a little bit of a twist or something that's a little surprising or counterintuitive. It's all just like, you have to dive into the intricacies of like, oh, it rolled together, or then like the ball splits there, you know, the ball splits, or then the balls go same, like whatever, right? You have to like dive into like the intricacies of the technique. But in terms of the concept, it's pretty flat in terms of the dramaturgy of a piece, you know? So all these things, like even the rolling ramps or the dropping the balls, they flip up or whatever, it's just like, I do it once and you go, oh, that was fun, but it never gets more fun. It just kind of gets like the same fun, if that, maybe a little less fun because you're bored. So then you try, I mean, but really it's a problem of like, of this type of work. And and we were talking about the color earlier, and this idea of like paint. I was sad when Cirque du Soleil painted my things white. But this one, for example, like I had said that trick was like a one-off trick, and so somehow, I don't know, the raw unpainted aesthetic really matched just this bizarre moment or something. This little image. I mean, it didn't develop more. You know, you do it for 30 seconds, dropping with the tennis balls. It doesn't go anywhere, it's just that. And so it's like, it can just be that. But this piece, I had this unpainted when I first made it, and because it was like a 4 or 5 minute exploration of the patterns possible with this structure, you were kind of looking at it for 4 or 5 minutes at a time in the audience, and it just looked unfinished. And it's one of those things about these like unconscious cues that when you go to see a show, I remember thinking, Sean McKinney, he came with his blue jeans and his white t-shirt, and that's his costume. And his whole point was, I just want to be myself, and I want to be who I am on stage. And I don't want to dress up in a certain way that's not me. And he felt that dressing up with like black pants and like a dress shirt was distracting to what he was trying to do. It turns out though, of course, when he showed up with the blue jeans and the ripped jeans and the t-shirt, for all the people expecting him to wear a normal costume, it was even worse. It was more distracting. He shouldn't, I mean, it was great what he did. But on one hand, you got to communicate with your audience, right? And like if he would have just worn the black dress pants and the button-up shirt, he maybe could have, in another way, gotten to his message, right? Like more directly. Because for sure, people were super distracted by his clothes that year. I mean, that's all they talked about. To the point where they didn't see the juggling, especially the old-timers. And
yeah, that makes sense.
When he came out in '91, they were just like, that wasn't a costume, that's not professional. And you're just like, and I'm just there going like, he did the best juggling I've seen in my life.
Yeah, me too.
Like I was just watching the juggling, and I thought he looked amazing.
It worked. I think it would have been very distracting for me if he had a suit on and was like rolling and jumping and like.
Sure.
But I guess I'm not
different audience. Do you have different contexts, different demographics?
I didn't have like an established vision of what a costume should be when I was 13 or something.
There you go. Yeah.
So maybe that's it. But
yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And so same thing like with this. It's like I just wanted to have the raw wood, you know. But then on one hand, I know some people like look at that and they go, well, didn't he think to paint that? And while they're thinking that thought, I'm doing like 10 different patterns.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, well, let me acknowledge that there is some sort of expectation there of what is professional and finished and when do you show things to people and what do they want to see and whatever. Mm-hmm. But then it was a whole thing of like, what color do I paint it? Because painting it black, I mean, gives such a different effect, like where the structure almost disappears. And the structure here is the whole thing. And so you're stuck with that idea of like, I want to paint it, but what color should it be? And now I'm using the yellow balls. Maybe it's not so bad with the yellow balls, but I had white balls. I don't know why I didn't have different colored ones. Maybe this should be yellow and these should be white. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, it's a whole idea about this idea of normally we want the structures on stage to disappear. We paint everything black.
Yeah. But
the whole point of juggling is that it's a relationship between objects in space and time and bodies and materials. So they have to be visible. It's the same thing when you wear all black and then you juggle and you hide your body. I do it a lot because it's just such a utilitarian, easy thing that, oh, you're wearing all black, you must be performing, because that's mm-hmm. slightly odd choice for everyday, mm-hmm. Living. Mm-hmm. But then I don't want to hide my body.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It's something I struggle with a lot, especially on all these colors you've seen today. It's something that's really unresolved, and that goes back to this idea of like I never sat down and formally did color studies of paints and stagecraft and lights and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like a trade-off between like wearing the all black is not distracting, but then it also actually has a negative externality of can't being able to see the balls.
Oh, it's that.
Vice versa also.
I would say, but it's the whole thing too of like you see a juggler wearing all black with white props, and that has such a certain expectation at a certain period of time in a certain place in the world of it being pretentious or artistic or whatever.
French.
Yeah, French, sure.
So I think.
Sure. And so then, you want to kind of steer away from that, but then if you show up with multicolored props, then it's like a kid's party and you're a joke, it's not serious, and I don't know, there's all these things to like, I don't know, be aware of, but yeah, I don't know. So this was, I wouldn't say that this was really successful, like when I had the two things, I think it's a much better piece than the 4 waves. Mm-hmm. I mean, sure, you can technically like switch between them. It didn't add, again, there's also the scale of the prop. It's like super huge, and maybe you expect something like crazy cool is gonna happen, and then it's just like,
interesting, right?
It's just this, and then maybe you're into that, but it doesn't, I don't know, it's a lot of effort for, I don't know. You have to focus in on it.
I got you.
It's not so spectacular.
I got you.
But yeah, it's the...
Like maybe it overpromises.
Yeah, it overpromises for sure. I mean, I call it I call this idea where there's not any new information into the system after the initial push. It's the swinging trapeze syndrome. Because when you go to swinging trapeze, as soon as that person swings the length of the swing, they're not going to swing longer than that. It's the length of the rope, and like, they're not going to swing like around or like twist or like turn. They're not going to. They're going to go like this for the next like 8 minutes.
Right.
And so in order for you to really engage that act, you have to drill into the details of like, okay, this is going to happen for the next 8 minutes, so what else can I care about?
Right.
Oh, they did a thing there, but how do they stand back up? Oh, that was different than the second time how they stood up and whatever. But you still have to like swing back and forth for 8 minutes.
Do you think people feel that way when they see just regular juggling props?
For sure.
Like you can just throw and catch it.
Yeah, definitely.
To what extent is it different with like a prop like this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think this obviously points everything in a really more specific direction, right?
It does,
like if you've never seen this before, you walk in.
Yeah.
Even if there's no balls, you maybe go like, that looks like a track. Well, I don't know. But as soon as I go like this, like the game's done.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it. it's probably gonna roll in there, and it's gonna, yep, rolls back just like I thought that it might, because we're on Earth and whatever. Yeah. And it's not a magic show, or I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's a magic show, it comes here and stops there or something.
But you could sort of enjoy it in the same way that you enjoy like ambient music or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. I think, I mean, then the game becomes like taking the audience on that journey into the details of the technique. Yeah. And then it really depends on how good of a context you've set up for them to have that conversation about like, hey, like, check out, this is gonna roll 3 times and I'm gonna grab it. Then it's gonna roll 2 times and I'm gonna grab it. Then every time. Sure. Which is what a lot of this becomes. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of getting into just the composition of repetition is what it becomes. Right. And yeah, so I think this was less powerful than just the half version of this, which we can look at later. It has a different look anyway too. But yeah, so that was, but you know, it was like a fun experiment. And maybe it would be like now, maybe in the moment it would be really amazing to build a circular one that turns, and I just stand here and it just does that one thing, and then you know, whatever. I don't know. So let's look at one more. So let's see. Here, can you hold this? So like this was a funny prop. So this was like basically this was a misremembered prop that I saw from a Michael Motion show. So I just remember going to see Michael Motion a few different times, and since I've seen those shows, I got to, I'm happy to say I got to know him a bit, you know, and I got to know a little bit about behind the scenes of the work and hear some of the stories of the work. And so, you know, he has the crystal ball piece. So the first version of the crystal ball piece is about 20 minutes long, and he did it one time at Jacob's Pillow and hasn't performed the full piece since then. And so the crystal ball piece originally had 3 or 4 or 5 different sections to it. It wasn't just him and the ball as we were really familiar with it. Yeah. He actually interacted with the crystal balls with other sorts of props. And one of the props that, so he never did the full piece again, but he did some of the pieces in some of his shows, like periodically, like spread out here and there. And I was trying to remember, I went to see his show, and I was convinced he had made I guess something like this for some reason. It was like an arc that the ball rolled on a track. But yeah, his shape was quite a bit different. I mean, it was still a bow shape. It was still a half circle, or like this. But it was really like I can't even explain it. It was 3-dimensional somehow. It bowed out in the middle and came to the point on the end, and it had a few different tracks in it or something. And he kind of rolled it along, and almost like this is really weird, but it reminded me like an upright double bass vibe. Sure. Of just like sculpted with like a violin, kind of. Yeah, yeah. Like a resonating body, a resonant acoustic instrument. And the grooves were almost like maybe where the strings would be. Right. It was just beautiful. It was just such a beautiful thing. But one thing when I saw him do is I really remember he left the thing rocking there on stage with a ball in it, and the ball would do that transfer of energy. Yeah. Do you know what is that? Like harmonic oscillations? Motion. Yeah. Right. That transfer of energy between the ball and the other moving body, right? And I wanted to study that. I thought that was the first time I ever saw it. And I was just like, whoa, that ball is not moving like normally. Like what's happening? I didn't understand that the energy was transferring between the two things. Yeah. And so I had my dad build me this to try to figure that out, like what could be done with that. And yeah, and just from that moment in Michael's show and just like, going like, man, what is happening with that? And I couldn't figure it out to the point where I was like, well, let's just make this thing. And then I thought this is what he had, just like a basic track, you know? It wasn't what he had, but but I mean, it kind of worked enough that I could kind of figure out like, oh, okay, so the ball pushes the arc, and the arc pushes the ball. And what I wanted to do was end up from this little like prototype study was like to turn it into something more like the four loops, like I saw, that somehow that would, I don't know, it just never happened, right? Yeah. But there was some sort of study about like motion with this, and seeing Michael's show and just thinking that like something weird was going on, not understanding that dynamic or whatever. So yeah, I never used this in a show or anything for anything. I literally just tried to like, you know, recreate that moment in the show. And because of how this works, it totally does not work well. It just tips over, but.
Oh yeah.
But
even if it was not on a carpet.
Yeah, no, it's just badly designed. Like I said, his really bowed out 3-dimensionally, and it was like it was like a sculpture.
Right.
But that really stuck out in my head, and
that's cool.
That was just like a fun attempt to try to maybe translate that movement into some of this stuff I was doing with the arcs on these other sort of structures, whatever.
Right.
So anyway, never used it in a show for anything. Never made it for it. Never used it for anything. But
nice. Again,
it's a funny thing to have hanging around your juggling studio. It looks like impressive. Like, oh, you're really doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So.